These are baby backs, and more times than not, I find bone fragments on them. So what I like to do is give them a quick bath, some fresh water, just cold water. Make sure you wash your sink first. It's not a good idea to run them under the faucet. It's a good way to splash bacteria all over your kitchen. Even after this, you're still going to want to disinfect your sink, your counters. Just be careful. But I'd rather not bite into a piece of bone. Just want to square off any thin pieces. This is just going to burn off in the smoker, so there's no sense in having it on there. This is a shiner. It's already showing through. That's not going to make it in the smoker. Chop that off. On the face, there's a couple chunks of fat and extra meat. Get rid of those. Not gonna get too excessive. This stuff will be fine. Feel around for any bones that don't need to be there. Feels pretty good. Pork ribs, you want to remove the membrane off the backside. It allows more exposure of the meat. Let the rub soak in and whatnot. So just find a bone. I like to start in the center. Use a butter knife. Pry up underneath of it. Sometimes you'll find ribs that already have the membrane removed, but most times it's still on there. Just pry it up. Rip it off. I like to get rid of this flap. It just looks nasty. If you've watched my other videos, you can tell that I like to brine a lot. So I'm going to dry brine these as well. Start with some kosher salt. Moderate layer across the whole thing.
Edges.
It's going to increase flavor, help it retain moisture. For the backside, I just do salt and pepper because sugar tends to burn, and in my smoker, you get the burn of the heat from the bottom side. And so if these are just salt and pepper, they're gonna hold up a lot better. At the top side, I like to rub down with, just have my homemade barbecue rub. I like to put the salt down first so it can soak into the meat. Most of this other stuff in this rub isn't gonna get absorbed, but this salt is gonna act as a brine. So put that down first, follow up with whatever rub you want. Just make sure that the rub that you're using on top of the salt isn't too salty. You could overpower it. I'm gonna add one more thing. Some McCormick Honey Hickory. It's good stuff. Just light dusting. Also, I use a little bit of accent seasoning. Gives it a nice unique flavor. Just a small amount. And I'm gonna wrap these in plastic wrap and put them back in the cooler. They're gonna sit for at least a few hours this morning to dry brine and get ready for the smoker. Ribs are rubbed. You can already see them starting to glisten a little bit. Salt's starting to do its work. Get these wrapped up, disinfect my kitchen. Life hack, when you want to save fridge space and not contaminate it with raw meat, use a cooler. So whenever I do a cook, I always calculate approximately how much cook time I'm gonna have. I'm cooking baby back ribs today. I know they're gonna take anywhere from 6 to 7 hours. And I know I wanna have dinner around 5 o'clock. So I have to get the ribs on at 10 to 11 o'clock. But not just that. I need the pit to be up to temp, running clean, a good coal bed established, all those things I need to take into account, and I figure out when I need to start my pit. So all that being said, it's about 8:30 right now. I need to get the offset going. I've started to split some wood. I got those cut down to pretty good sizes. I'm gonna start a charcoal chimney, get this firebox going, and I'm gonna just feed it some wood splits. And right now, I'm not worried about getting to a specific temperature. I just want the pit to warm up because this offset is made out of 1/4-inch steel. So it holds temperature very well, whether it be cold or hot. So if I get it started, get a good fire going in it, it's gonna warm that metal up. And later on, when I need to regulate a specific temperature, I can cut the airflow down and the amount of fuel and regulate a consistent temperature, because the steel will help me. I've tried running larger wood splits before, so I don't have to tend to the fire as often. But in the end, it's not really worth it. What I find is I'll make a bunch of small wood splits. They start up fast, they burn cleanly. It's easier to regulate temperature because if you throw a big log on, that's a lot of BTUs. You can really jack your temperatures up, where if you're just starting to drop slightly, you can add a small split and it's only going to increase the temperature a little bit. So these are some wood splits that I've cut down already. This is about the size that I like to use. This is some good seasoned oak. It's cheap and very readily available around me from Central Michigan. I need to split some more, but for startup, that's going to be more than enough. So if you use charcoal, whether it be ugly jump smoker, Kamado grill, charcoal grill, offset, whatever, or starting up an offset for wood splits like I am right now, if you're not using a charcoal chimney, I'm telling you, you're doing it wrong. So this is a charcoal chimney. You stuff newspaper in the bottom of it, and you fill the top with charcoal. 99% of the time, I have lump charcoal, but I ran out, so I'm gonna be using some briquettes. I open up the side door so it gets plenty of airflow, and you simply light the newspaper on the bottom. The best advice I can give somebody is to buy the best smoker that you can afford. This smoker was pretty pricey, but it's made out of 1/4-inch steel and it has fully welded construction. So one, it's gonna last a very long time, especially if I take care of it. And two, it's actually gonna make it easier for me to run. The thicker steel acts as an insulator, and it helps regulate pit temperatures a lot better than a cheap run-of-the-mill box store offset smoker. This is a Old Country Barbecue Pits Brazos, and is it the best smoker on the market? No. Is it the best bang for the buck smoker on the market? Absolutely. A few things that make this cooker desirable are the smokestack being at great level. That allows the smoke and the heat to run from the firebox underneath this baffle, across your food on the grate, and out of the smokestack. This particular grill is 1/4 inch thick steel, and all of it is fully welded construction. The firebox is welded to the cooking chamber. It's going to be very strong, last a long time. The firebox is very big, and you get plenty of airflow underneath your wood. This damper, you can shut the door, adjust your airflow. I normally actually just leave this open for maximum airflow. And then I'll shut down my chimney to regulate the draw and overall regulate temperature. Like I said, this isn't the best smoker on the market, but it's the best value. So I had to do some mods to it. Not a big deal. I probably spent $20 to $30 in materials. Not a big deal. And it's super easy. I'll walk you through what I did. So these grills are sold at Academy Sports, and they're assembled in Mexico. They're all handmade, and each and every grill is slightly different. So if you're shopping for one, check the fitment of the door to the cooking chamber, weld quality, you know, if like the shelf functions correctly, if the hinges are mounted right, and just overall fitment and quality of everything. I drove quite a while to pick this up a while ago, and I picked out the best one on the floor. It's been really good to me. But so on top of fitment issues, way to resolve that is to use this felt tape. This is called Lava Lock. I ordered it right on Amazon, and you just run it along the seam of the lid. It helps seal up the smoke and heat. And then the gap was still a little bit too big right here, so I had to double up the tape. But it works great, seals up perfect, and it holds temp really well. Initially, I ran the felt tape around the firebox lid too, but this actually sealed up pretty good. The only issue is on the cooking chamber. I could start to see some discoloration from heat and smoke escaping. So what I did is just run a single line up the one side of it. The rest of it seals pretty good, and the felt tape actually did more harm than good around the rest. As you can see, the smoke started to thin out on this chimney. Means that the coals are almost ready. They're about 3/4 of the way lit. It's gonna be enough. I'm gonna shut this door to prevent any spillage of hot coals. And then you just dump this down the center of the firebox. Get a nice bed of hot coals going. Back to Boy Scouts, log cabin. That's how I always start mine. Get great airflow. Logs start up great. This wood started up really good. It's going to continue to burn, but it's started enough to be able to shut this lid. I'm going to open my door, give it some more oxygen. I'm going to close the cook chamber. Open this chimney for maximum draw and let it do its thing for a little while. So the smoke right now on startup is thick and white. And you may be thinking, well, I want to smoke my food, so that's great. It's not. What you want is thin blue smoke. Sometimes it almost becomes invisible. So right now, I have a little bit of live flames, but the wood is still smoldering. Once all these logs get hotter and start to combust more, that smoke will clean up a lot. I'm going to take these log splits that I have, put them on the firebox lid. This gets pretty hot, and it's going to preheat these logs. The wood has to get up to a certain temperature to combust. So preheating the logs will drastically decrease the time it takes for those to combust and burn efficiently, resulting in clean smoke and delicious food. So I just line these up, and then once it's time to load a piece of wood, I'll insert it through the side, but I'll take the log on the end, stuff that in, and I'll take the rest of these and move them over and then put another fresh piece there. So I constantly have a conveyor of wood that's getting preheated, and I always have really good results. Normally I get this thing fired up 1 to 2 hours before I have to cook on it, because it'll allow this metal to get nice and warm, help regulate temperatures. It'll allow this firebox lid to get really hot, and I'll put my wood on there and get that stuff preheating, and these will burn really good after about an hour sitting on top of here. Less time later on when this is really hot, but for now, on startup, I like to give these a good amount of time to get hot and the fire to get established, a good coal bed to get going, and it'll burn good and it'll make my life easier later on. So as you can see, the smoke is already thinned out. Got some good flames in the firebox. The wood's burning pretty well, but it's only going to get better from here. I'm by no means an expert at barbecuing, but I've been doing it quite a while and I've learned a lot, and I'm learning every day. But there's a guy on YouTube, his channel is called Mad Scientist BBQ. His name's Jeremy Yoder. He runs an awesome channel. He's very knowledgeable, gives great advice, but he says the difference between bad barbecue, okay barbecue, and great barbecue isn't in rubs and seasonings. It's not in injections. It's not in marinades. It's not in any number of different things. The secret to great barbecue is in fire management. And he is 100% correct. So if you take one thing from today's video to learn, know that great barbecue is from clean smoke and successful fire management. Now, if you eliminate the factor of clean smoke, obviously there's ways to improve your food. And I'm going to recommend what I've learned to make your food better. Brines, injections, my favorite rubs, that sort of thing. But what it really comes down to is cooking method. And you have to make sure that you have clean smoke. So it's almost 10 o'clock and I'm almost ready to get the ribs on here. The pit's running a little bit hot. It's almost 350 degrees, which is fine. It's what I wanted for startup, but now I need to drop that temperature down for when I'm ready to cook. So this smokestack has been open most of the way throughout startup, and since it's running hot, my intake side is completely open. So the way to regulate temperature is with my smokestack. So I'm gonna shut this down a good amount. I'll let that sit for 10 minutes or so and come back and check on it. These ribs were trimmed, the membrane was taken off, seasoning was added, allowed to rest in the cooler for a few hours to dry brine. As you can see, the rub's turned into kind of a paste on the outside, but that'll be just fine. The smoker is dropped down to almost 300 degrees, right where I want it. I'm gonna get these on, we're gonna start this cook. Perfect. When you position meat on the smoker, it's gonna cook the way it was set. Meaning that if you have this stretched out and thinned out, after it cooks, it's gonna stay like that. So when you put it on, make sure that both ends are kind of scrunched up. The meat is gathered as much as possible. It's gonna help it cook more evenly, and you're gonna have a fatter piece of meat when you're done. An offset cooker is impossible to maintain a specific temperature the entire time. So you're gonna have spikes in temperature. The logs are gonna cook down, temperature's gonna drop. But if you're really good at fire management, you should be able to keep it within 25 degrees or so. Logs are burning great. So now I have this empty spot on my firebox. I'm gonna scooch these over. These are feeling nice and hot. You can actually rotate these. So if they get too hot, they could actually combust on top of the smoker. So spin these around, let them get equally warm. And then now I have room for a couple new logs. So add these, come over here, add those. Now those are gonna have quite a bit of time to preheat while I use these logs before those get to the end, and I'll use those. And I just continue to do that, and it works out great. So I'm not gonna be out here all day, and to help me with that, I hooked up my Bluetooth thermometer. So it's got 4 probes in it. I only have 1 probe hooked up to monitor grate level temperature, because the only thing I'm really concerned about right now is what these ribs are cooking at. Normally, if I was cooking something else, I would monitor internal temperature, but for ribs, I don't go by internal temperature. I go by flexibility of the rib and how they look. So people call it bend test, and I'll elaborate on that when the time comes. But for right now, as you can see, I have a temp gauge on my smoker, but this does me no good when I'm in there. So to help, I hook this up, sends out a Bluetooth signal. I connect it to my phone. I open the app. I can set high temperature alarms, low temperature alarms, internal temperature alarms. Like, it's very customizable and it's super handy. Also, I was talking about this temperature gauge earlier. This is reading almost 325 degrees. And at the grate level where the ribs are actually cooking, I'm sitting at 304. So typically there is about a 25 degree difference, but I'm telling you, this thing is super handy, and for $40, you really can't beat it. Some nice color. Starting to dry out though. Another spritz. Looking pretty good. Check the bottoms, make sure it's not burning. Those look good. Looking really good. As you cook ribs, fat starts to render, connective tissues start to break down, the ribs become more tender. So the longer you cook them, the more tender they'll get. Competition style ribs should have a nice bite to where it's tender, you can easily chew it off the bone, but when you take your bite, there's meat left around where your teeth weren't. Some people prefer fall off the bone. If that's the case, if you're one of those people, cook them longer. Me personally, I like them quite tender, but I don't like them fall off the bone. I like the rib to have some structural integrity to it. So if we pick this rack up in the center, it should have a little bit of bend to it. It's a little flexible. And this one, about the same, but it's still pretty stiff. So the longer we cook these, the more they'll break down, the juicier they'll get, and the more tender they'll get. And eventually, you'll be able to pick it up in the center, and you'll start to see the meat crack when you try to pick it up, and it'll bend considerably more. That is when you want to pull them. So I just explained the bend test, but also, as you can see, some of these ribs are starting to show, the meat's starting to recede back on the bone. That'll also happen. So these bones are starting to poke through, the ribs are starting to tenderize, the bottoms are still looking good. I've cooked ribs a variety of different ways. A very popular recipe is 3-2-1, where you smoke them 3 hours, wrap them for 2 hours, unwrap them for the last hour with some sauce. They're okay, but honestly, I've never really been impressed with them. I've tried it multiple times. I don't know. I just don't like them. So my most successful ribs, before I got my offset, I was cooking on my electric smoker, were just unwrapped, 275 for 6 hours or so. Perfect. So tender, juicy, just nice bark, great. Well, then I got my offset, and the offset works differently. And I cook them a little hotter in this too, so the bark forms faster, things like that. But still, I prefer to cook them naked. And maybe the last hour, I'll cook them for 5 or 6 hours. And the last hour or so, I'll wrap them in foil just to help tenderize them a little more, collect some moisture, and they seem to turn out really good. I wouldn't call the wood you use on ribs make or break. I tried oak because I had a huge stack of it. It's readily available and very cheap in my area. So I tried it. Turns out oak has a pretty mild flavor. It's great on ribs, no complaints. If I had hickory in the area and was able to get my hands on it, I would probably prefer to use that, but it's okay. And also cherry, apple, those are fantastic with pork, but also it's hard to get your hands on around here and it's very expensive. So I'm sticking with oak and they turn out great, so can't beat it for the price. We're almost 5 hours deep on these ribs and they're still looking good. They're starting to dry out though. I gotta stay on top of them with the spritzing. And we'll do the bend test. As you can see, they're getting a little more flexible. That one's still pretty stiff. I might actually swap these, and also, just for more even cooking, I think I'm gonna flip these around. Oops, not like that. So it's been 6 hours on some smoke. Ribs have a really nice color. Just give them one last good spritz where we wrap them. Just get some moisture on them. You can see that they've got a little bit of sag to them, but they're still pretty tight. So hoping after we wrap these that they'll tenderize quite a bit more, which they should. Foil normally helps really push through the cook. So I'll get these wrapped. I just cut an extra long sheet of foil. I use the shiny side in to help it cook a little faster. Fold it in half. Roll this edge in. Roll this edge in. Roll this edge in. I'm gonna have to put the phone down, but wrap it nice and tight, and I'm gonna do the same thing for this other rack. Got both racks wrapped up real tight in some aluminum foil. Gonna continue to run the smoker at 300 degrees, give it about another hour or so, and they should be perfect. These have been on for another hour and a half wrapped. I tried to keep it upwards of 300 degrees. They should be nice and tender. I'll bring these inside, let them sit for about 5 minutes or so.